Okay, so we want to see who reviewed the location. So we want to store their name and probably a profile picture or a link to their profile picture to our models, as well as the user ID of who did it. So the reason why I'm storing all three of those is that I want to make sure that whenever I... Is that fuzzy?
Mm-hmm.
Can you, I got it.
So we're not recording today?
Oh, we are. That's better. All right, so we are adding prop string username, prop string reviewer name, prop, what did I say? Picture, that's right. So this is all just so we can actually store who did it. So now whenever we see the review, we can say, hey, Gabe reviewed this, and here's Gabe's little photo. So just as before, we've now made a change to our model, so that means we have to run a migration. .NET migrations add, we'll call this added reviewer user fields. So yes, nothing really too crazy so far, right? No pending migrations were applied. That's interesting.
Just move you up this ones a little bit. Nice, thank you.
Oh, awesome. It's already there. Cool deal. So now we need to add stuff to our front end to get this to work, right? Because remember, most of the authentication, at least for Auth0, is handled on the front end. So it's going to be a lot of what we did yesterday. So who recalls what we have to do?
Alan probably does.
Unfortunately, Alan's not here. So,
So we went on their website, we took a bunch of their thingies, all their documentations, and we put them in our code. Forget exactly which spots. One second, I have a file set up. Let me do that.
can you Slack me that link that you have open by any chance?
me see if I think I have that. Wait a second. Yeah. Like React user profile sort of thing.
Yeah, Slack me the link in the Cohort XI channel, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. This look like where you're trying to go?
Yep, that's exactly where I'm trying to go.
Now you got the double mouse thing going.
Ha!
Are you missing the Mac yet?
No.
Do you use that computer regularly?
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah. I really do prefer this one over the Mac.
Yeah.
Yep. So, we're gonna log in.
Do you see it too on your screen? Or just there?
It's up there.
How do all those choices get added?
Oh, this is logging into Auth0.
It's crazy for you guys.
Was it the Ruby guys?
I'm just gonna play them.
Okay.
This cohort
Other shit going down.
I just want to go to my page. I just want to make a new app. Oh my god. Auth0. Don't be dumb. Right, so new app. Coffee ship. So there's web app.
What are the other options?
So the other options are if you're doing, it's actually right here. So it's machine, it's native and a regular web app. So we're doing a single page application, which we know is centered around like React or Vue or something like that. It means all the routing and most of the rendering, if not all the rendering, is done client side.
What does it mean when it says single page application? If there's no routes?
Yeah, all the routing and stuff. So even though we're going to different pages, like inside of our app,
They're all the same like domain, but slash.
yeah, so that's not.
Is that what that means?
Yeah. So I come over here, localhost 3000. So if I go to this page, and even though it says that I'm going to a different URL, like slash location to -2, even though it says I'm going to a different URL, I'm still technically on the index page.
Okay.
I still haven't left index.html.
What is an example of the other ones? The other
So
ones have?
the other ones is more of a traditional application, and it pretty much is something that we're going to hit on next week
Okay.
briefly.
All right, that's fine.
But it's where all the rendering and all the routing is happening server side. So instead of, so what's actually happening whenever we go from this page back to the index page is that it's changing the URL and then changing what gets rendered, all client side.
Okay.
So it's kind of faking a lot of that stuff. So it's never leaving your browser. If this was a more traditional application, this page would have been rendered server side. And then we just would have gone HTML and CSS. Then when I click more details, I would go back to my server. My server would do stuff, and then it would return to me this new page.
React.
So it makes that round trip to get everything every time.
Okay. Is the reason that it's not doing those things server side because we use something like React?
Yep.
Does the coffee cups work right now? Can you play the coffee cup?
Yeah.
So when you start, did you not push the stars?
I did not push the stars because they didn't. No, they did work. I just didn't push the stars. I thought I did.
We were gonna make it so that you had to have an account.
Yep.
To like you had to auth essentially.
Yep.
To leave a review or whatever we did.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, does that answer your question, Andrew?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah. So, and all this really does, it changes what display settings that you can change here. But it also acts pretty much the same. So, head on over to that quick start guide. We got the keys. We need to add ourselves some Auth0. Come over here. Auth.js. And since I know we're going to be doing a whole bunch of more stuff, just bringing over everything real fast. Just kind of going through quickly what we did yesterday. We're creating our Auth.js, which is going to house all of our authentication logic. And inside of that, we're just going to add a whole bunch of helper functions here and there. Like is authenticated, log in, log out, get user, all the kind of stuff that we talked about yesterday. We just want to bring those over just to prepare us for what we're doing next.
So you're making an auth folder in the coffee shop as well?
In the API?
Yeah.
So not in the API. We'll get to configuring the API in the second half. Because we just kind of glanced over it yesterday.
So you're doing it in coffee shop client?
Yep. Yep. The majority of the configuration and stuff for authentication will happen in the client-side application.
All right.
Because your server should be dumb in regards to authentication. It should be as dumb as possible. Only because it's now another party to be involved, and your user never directly interacts with the server. It only interacts with the client.
Fair enough. But if we were like a big company, we would do another server.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are different strategies to handle authentication. Luckily, you as junior developers shouldn't really have to make those decisions ever. Hopefully you have a senior dev that you're working with that will actually make those choices for you. So we added our Auth.js, we added our history.js. The last thing we have to do is update our routing to actually account for all of that stuff. So if we recall, we're no longer using browser router. Because we just want, so with browser router, it comes with its built-in history. And that history is kind of hidden from everywhere else. History management stuff. But we want our Auth.js to have access to that history stuff, to actually be able to like push to and redirect them and do all that fancy stuff.
What about using hash router and stuff? Same thing.
Yeah. Yep. So. I mean, I've done this plenty of times, and I'm still just bringing over what's there.
I think you're past your 15-minute marker.
I think so. I think so. Mhm. So something that I like to do as I'm adding new features and adding new stuff like this is I like to kind of add stuff side by side and then merge them because I know that these new routes are going to replace my old routes, but I want to ensure that I don't lose anything as I go. Change this from a component to a function. So why are we using functions here instead? Any thoughts to why?
Just using the render function in line. So through the, just basically using the render function to render the component.
Yep. And we want to do that because we want to pass down this authentication object, our auth service. We want to pass that down as props to all of our components. Yeah. Now let's add in our callback page.
The callback just like the default. We can't find some other code that goes there.
It's not the def. So what do you mean by default?
It's the first place it goes. Is that what it is?
It could be named whatever you want. So if you want to name it like what?
It's not home though, is it?
Yeah, it's callback is just wherever your authentication service is returning your token to.
Loading.
What?
Loading.
Yeah. Yep.
Should it be your homepage?
It could, but it really should be something separate by itself. Just because you can't guarantee how long it'll take. So if the user sees the homepage load and then like 3 seconds later it loads again, the user could be like, what's going
So
on?
it's just like a standby.
Yeah. That's a little UX practice that like, oh, I don't know how long this will take, so I'm going to force you to wait before you continue.
If you did it to the home page, it would just reload the home page after.
Yep. All right, so we have We've added our authentication, but we haven't added any actual like login or logout stuff yet.
Let's take you back to the home page. Slash.
Yep, the slash will take back to the home page, which we may or may not want later whenever we actually get to login happening. But there we go. So,
You put that right in that, yes.
yep, I just overwrote because really authentication sits almost on top of the routing. So, because we need to check, we need to do, because of the callback route, it's saying, hey, whenever we get hit to the callback route, we actually want to handle the authentication first. So you can kind of think of the authentication sitting on top of the route. So we have to modify and kind of get our routing stuff ready for it. Which is what we just did here.
What's in your Splash JS?
What's in my what?
Your Splash?
Right now, nothing. We're not using it. So I just made a whole bunch of changes. I want to make sure that I didn't break anything before we continue. Like that. Not read location of undefined. That error feels familiar. There we go. Head back here. All right, so here we are. Let's take a 10-minute break, stretch our legs, and whenever we come back, we'll actually start integrating the login flow into our app and kind of start doing that. Everything we've done so far has kind of been boilerplate, so it's kind of when we come back, let's start actually using it.